All right, so let's take it back to the basics. Going to be going over ladder safety today. So for my contractors who are watching this video, no, this is not going to replace your OSHA 10. Make sure you study and get the right information. Mainly for my homeowners doing the small do-it-yourself projects or just a quick setup as far as buying your new ladder. 4 things I'm going to cover in this video today: the different kinds of ladders and the most probable applications for them, checking them, so as far as maintenance goes. I'm going to also throw in a few tips, the fears when it comes to ladder, at least what scares me, and then lastly is going to be setting the ladder up and down. Most common types of ladders. So for you very tall homeowners, as far as your house goes, 2-3 stories plus, you may need a 2-story ladder. There's 2 main different kinds of 2-story ladders, and it's really going to vary on the material. The most lightweight option that most homeowners are going to choose, this is something you're going to see that a lot of painters use to get up and down, is your aluminum ladders. So the aluminum ladders, they're very light, they're thinner, and they're going to be pretty easy to operate. All they have is a rope tied to one end where you pull that rope to help you extend it further. One of the main downsides of these ladders is their thinner profile. While it sounds very obvious to stay on the center line of a ladder, you really want to make sure you're doing that when you're climbing up and down these ladders, especially because the thinner the ladder it is and the more extended it is, the easier it is for it to slide out from you from left to right. These things are going to be fully extendable. They range a good bit, anywhere from 24, sometimes up to 36 feet. They're going to get you where you need to go. This is usually our go-to option when it comes to climbing a taller building. Another kind of 2-story ladder is going to be your fiberglass ladders. So these are going to be exponentially heavier than your aluminum ladders. So yes, they may last a little bit longer. They're a little bit more sturdy, but definitely keep that in mind if it's something that you're a little bit older. You're going to have a lot of trouble getting these guys set up by yourself until you really learn how to properly balance a ladder. In some scenarios, contractors are made to use the fiberglass ladders simply for the fact that it's a non-conductive material. One of the most common ladder types is what we call an A-frame ladder or a collapsible ladder. This is the most popular ladder, at least I've seen in the roofing industry. I love these ladders because they're super compactable. You click them once, they pop out to an A-frame and they're extendable, and then you click them again and they go to lay flat, in which the vertical on these can be anywhere from the smaller ones that are only 3 feet tall can be up to 12 feet versus your bigger ones that can be well over 22 feet, 24 feet that can still get you on most 2-story buildings. This is one of the ladders that's the most versatile. You can put it in most vehicles, especially because they do make a 4-foot and a 3-foot version of these as well. One of the advantages of these ladders as well, because it is wider at the top, it's going to be a little bit more sturdy. You're going to have a wider base on ground that's a little more uneven, and then especially at the top, at the gutter, it's going to have a better spread. Last kind of ladder I want to get into is something called a telescopic ladder. There's a lot of disadvantages to this ladder, and I do caution people, especially as a homeowner, if you're not experienced working with this kind of ladder, I typically don't recommend it. Ironically, I get the most oohs and ahs from homeowners when I do pull it out of my truck because the pure function of it is pretty neat. Like it's described, a telescopic ladder, each step is a rung that clicks open. So this thing as it stands fully compact is only about 2-3 feet tall, but when it extends it can get well up to 16 feet. Which sounds great, but just be cautious because if you're going to get a legitimate one, these still range in the $250 to $300 range, and you're going to find them usually at your Sherwin-Williams and paint stores. They are mainly for interior applications. I've heard of a lot of accidents over the last couple years for roofers using these for something called a double pull, where instead of having one ladder that can get you all the way to the top, like a 2-story ladder, you put a ladder on the lower section, you carry the telescopic ladder up to the second section, and that extends to get you up to that next level. These ladders do come on Amazon, and I recommend you purely stay away from those. They are a cheaper version that's probably going to end up getting you hurt because they do collapse pretty easily after a given time period, and you have to be very careful that they lock out every single time and the way you're stepping on them. Number 2 is getting into the setup. So as far as the setup goes, as a roofing professional, when you see me setting up my ladder, I'm going to pick the most flat ground that I can find, and I'm also going to put the top ideally near a valley or a lower slope. Hence, just being easily accessible for me to get up on that roof and get to where I need to go. This is going to obviously vary depending on what you're trying to do. The big key forms when setting up the ladder is just making sure you're on stable ground. A lot of the ladders do come with neat little levelers on each side now, which is something I would opt to do if you can afford it. Making sure, depending on how high up you're going, you want to kick that ladder out in an appropriate angle. There's a golden rule of thumb. I believe it's every 10 feet you want to be about 3 feet away from the structure, but obviously, if there's a shrub in the way, if there's other factors, just make sure that you're not standing the ladder too straight up. That's where you can run into balance issues. If it's too straight up, you off balance just a little bit backwards, and that's where a lot of accidents can occur. As far as setup goes as well, I like to carry a tool around called a ladder clip, which is pretty neat. It's a little pricey, but it's very, very easy to use. It's a quick application on and off. This is something I use when I get to the top of a ladder and I'm at the eave where a gutter is, and it latches onto that gutter and holds the ladder in place. There's a lot of different tools you can use as far as straps to make sure that you're purely secure in the right spot. I recommend staying away from the bungees. You usually have to do some kind of complex knot, and it can usually pull you in one or the other direction, so I would stay away from those. And my other tip is to also make sure that while you're securing yourself to a gutter, make sure that gutter is properly secured to the building, because if it's loose, securing yourself to another product that's loose, probably not going to do you much good. Third thing, my funnest fears when it comes to climbing a ladder. So I often say this all the time. People look at me crazy when I'm walking around on a roof, but I feel perfectly safe up there. My first scary part about a ladder is just getting off the roof. I carry something called a pitch hopper. You may not be familiar with this. It's just a trapezoid with a foam on the bottom that I can stand on. I like to leave it at the base of the roof where my ladder is. That way I can drop to a knee, take my time safely getting down onto the ladder, because this is where a lot of accidents occur. If you don't have the ability to secure the ladder to the gutter, like say if you have a gutter guard that's in the way, kicking that ladder out is a very easy way to get hurt and also get yourself stranded on a roof. So this is where I usually take the most time when it comes to getting up and down off the roof, but just with ladders in general. My other thing that I don't necessarily love when it comes to ladders is when a ladder's fully extended, it has a good bit of bounce. And if you are not comfortable with this or have not been on a fully extended ladder, it can freak you out a little bit. But it's perfectly normal. The more flex in a ladder, the better. That means it's not going to fail on you. Just be wary when you're climbing a ladder that's fully extended. It's going to bounce on you, which means it's also probably a pretty good idea if you have somebody else there to make sure they have it footed at the end of the ladder so it doesn't actually move or want to slip away from the material that you set it on. One thing I did overlook when I was talking about setting up a ladder is the surface is also very important. Not only that it's flat, but synthetic decks, if it's just rained at all and you're on a wood or painted surface, be extra careful because those are very slippery materials and that ladder can leave you in an instant. Last thing I wanted to go over was just a couple tips when it comes to maintenance. These ladders that you're throwing in the back of your truck, especially if you're a contractor, it gets exposed to a lot of rain. It's not something you cover up all the time. Yes, they can still go the mile, but make sure whenever it's starting to lock it all or if it's starting to get tight, grab a can of WD-40, spray it in there, make sure to keep it running properly. It's going to be a night and day difference. Because once it starts to rust or if it's just too far gone, a lot of the times there's no saving it when it gets to that point. And to double down on that point, if you're like me and you like to have a clean truck and you roll through a car wash, make sure you pull your ladders out and don't just have those ladders get exposed to an extra amount of water that they really just don't need. Lastly, before you even put up that ladder on the roof or on your house, just make sure you're giving it just an overall inspection. If it's dented in a certain area, if it's not properly locked out, especially on the A-frame ladders, you have to make sure that the buttons are fully extended and that way it's actually locked out. Because what I see a lot of the times is it's not locked out all the way, and then if it bounces, it'll catch and it can still collapse on you. So that's what I got for ladder safety today. Hopes this helps you guys. Thanks for watching.